Hi everyone, this is Adinda Rojas, and this is my lesson plan presentation. It'll probably look a little bit different from the majority of the ones that have already been posted, and that is because I have a little bit of a different perspective. So let's get started and I will show you what I mean. So here's a brief overview of the details of my lesson plan. I'm actually not a teacher, but I'm a registered behavior technician, and I work in a clinic which provides applied behavior analysis services for children with autism. So instead of focusing on traditional classroom instruction, I decided to format my plan based on the methods that we actually use in the clinic and based on the children that we actually see in the clinic. So my topic today is going to be teaching common sea animals. My target audience is preschoolers between age 3 and 5 who have autism spectrum disorder. We're going to use a variety of settings. The main one will be the classroom. And this is where we'll spend our time doing one-on-one intensive teaching. We'll also utilize the natural environment, and that can be anywhere away from the table, like a designated play area, even in the same room. It can be the lunchroom. It can be outside. It can even be in the hallway. Learning happens everywhere. You gotta have to take advantage of the opportunity when it arises. The time frame is about 10 to 20 minutes, and the majority of that will be at the table with breaks interspersed to go outside or participate in these natural environment activities and extension activities throughout the day. The materials that we're going to use are pretty simple, such as the table and chairs. But a fundamental concept of ABA is the use of positive reinforcement. So it's really, really important to have a selection of known reinforcing items available for your students. So if you know your kid likes if you know your student likes trains or Play-Doh or race cars, you want to make sure you have all three of those available to provide to the child so they can pick which one they want in the moment. That way they're motivated to work and you'll get a better response from them. So we also have the materials for the offline product as well as an iPad for the online product. The fun thing about iPad is, although we're going to use it for the lesson, it often serves as a really highly preferred reinforcer. So that's a really great one. Kids will work for that iPad, no question. So before we get too much farther, I want to provide a quick rundown of some ABA-specific language that I've used throughout the presentation. So ABA is basically the scientific study of behavior, and more specifically in this situation, the study of the functional relationship between a behavior and the events that happen immediately before and after it. So they called B.F. Skinner the father of behaviorism because he was one of the first to manipulate those events before and after behavior in order to create behavior change. But he also founded the notion of verbal behavior, which argues that language itself is a learned behavior. And he identified 6 verbal operants, which I have listed here. Manding is asking for things that you want. So I want a cookie. That's a mand. Tacting, naming or identifying objects. If a child sees a ball on the floor and they point to it and say ball, that's tacting. It's labeling. Echoic, repeating something that they've heard. So if I say ball, and the child says ball, he's echoing what I'm saying. That's an echoic. An intraverbal is answering questions or having a conversation. So if I ask a child, what do you do with a ball? They could answer roll it or kick it. That would be an intraverbal. And also a conversation that you can build upon as the child's skill increase. And these last two, textual and transcription, are not really relevant to our target audience. The textual is reading written words, and transcription is writing and spelling words that have been spoken. Our kids at the clinic typically do not read or write yet. They're not quite ready for those skills, so we're just going to skip over those for this lesson. But then outside of those operants, one of the assessment tools that we use in ABA is called the Verbal Behavior Milestones Assessment and Placement Program, or VBMAP. And this assessment measures not only those verbal behaviors listed above, but also some other skills, which can include listener responding, which would be selecting an appropriate picture or object from a group. So if I had a stack of 6 different types of fruit, and I said, point to the apple, and the student pointed to the apple, that would be responding. That would be listener responding to the appropriate target. Visual perceptual, matching to sample, is pretty self-explanatory as well. It's matching an identical picture or object to its sample. And this can be something identical, such as just stacking the same picture on top of it, or putting this duck on the same plate or on the same side of the table as its identical duck. And there are a few other skills as well, such as motor imitation, social play, and early academics, but we're only going to be using listener responding and matching to sample for this lesson. So here are the goals based on the operants that we just discussed. The wonderful thing about ABA is that it is completely individualized to the needs of the student based on the VB-MAP assessment and the goals that come from that, which makes adapting lessons really, really easy. So as the child begins to acquire those skills and master the targets that are initially set, then those same goals within the verbal operants, the tacks, the mands, the responding, they can also increase in difficulty as the student's skill set and verbal repertoire increase. So you'll see for tacting, the child can name a shark, but can they name the individual parts of the shark? Or they can match identical pictures, but can they sort animals from vehicles or clothing or foods, things like that. So as you can see, they're relatively simple, but easily adaptable and very, very versatile. So the teaching methods used in ABA are quite different than those used in traditional classrooms. Intensive table teaching, or ITT, consists of one-to-one instruction at the table with the child and the therapist, typically sitting across from each other in a relatively distraction-free environment. And the way it begins is with a cold probe, which is basically just probing the new targets to see what the child knows. That way you know which targets to focus on more and which ones might not need so much attention. So in this situation, what we would do is sit down at the table and present the 6 pictures of our animals and just ask the child to tack them and see what they know. And then once we move into the teaching trials, then we would move into what's called errorless teaching. And in that situation, the teacher presents the question and then immediately provides the correct response. So if the child didn't know octopus, as we move on to the teaching trials, I would present the octopus card and say, "What is it?" "Octopus." And the child would echo, "Octopus." So you're hitting an echoic target, but you're also hitting your tack target as well. And eventually, as the teaching trials continue throughout the day, my prompt would fade and the child would eventually be able to respond independently, "Octopus," when you ask, "What is it?" And again, there's positive reinforcement. Once they provide those correct responses, it's really, really important, especially in this teaching phase, to provide that reinforcement right away so they know, hey, you did a great job. This is what I want to see more of. And it really just increases the opportunity for them to respond more in the future. And a lot of times what happens is you'll mix in targets so you might have a tack target, you might have a matching target, you might have a motor imitation target, all mixed up really, really quickly. And the reason that happens that way is to really focus on fluency and getting the behavioral momentum so the child has an increased probability of responding correctly in the future. And I know I haven't done the best job of explaining ITT. It can be really complicated to explain. So I've included a link in case you're interested. It's about a 2-minute video of a YouTube video that I do not own of a really, really beautiful ITT session. So ideally, that's what ITT would look like. And then in addition to ITT, the Natural Environment Training, or NET, is also very critical to our students' success. This enables them to generalize the skills that are taught at the table in a natural environment, in different environments across different people, in different settings. So if a child can label an octopus at the table, can they do it when you're at a library looking through a book with a different picture, in a different room, with a different person asking in maybe a different way? And once that happens, that's our goal. We want our kids to learn and be able to generalize those skills. So it's more naturalistic. The interaction between the therapist and the child is very different. It's more play-based. Oftentimes it's child-led, and the therapist will interject and facilitate some interaction and get some of those targets in while the child is playing. And children learn through play, so they don't even realize how much they're learning. It also provides more opportunity for socialization with the other kids in there, learning their targets and being able to interact with each other in a natural environment on the playground. It really gives them the opportunity to practice those social skills, which is something a lot of kids with autism struggle with. So the offline products that I have for this lesson include those cards that I've been talking about. So it's just a set of 3x5 index cards with color pictures of the sea animals we're targeting for this lesson. I have an identical set and I have a non-identical set that I will show you real quick. This is the non-identical set. So again, talking about how easy it is to individualize a program for the students, this is representative of what a child who has already mastered an identical matching set would be working on. They would be matching one shark to the other. It's the same animal, but it looks different. Can you differentiate a different picture, but still be able to identify the same animal? So moving on to our net extension activity. This one's a little more fun. It's a little messier. The kids tend to love it. So what we're going to do is we're going to build our own little aquarium. So we've taken this plastic shoebox and we've added water and we've tinted the water blue and we've put in some marbles and some little sea animals and we have gotten a net and we're going to go fishing. And this is a really, really great way to just let the kids' imagination run free. You can add sand, you can explore the different textures and really allow them the opportunity to get that sensory input. And there's a billion ways you can meet those targets and those goals within this lesson with this one little box. They can ask to put the fish in next. You can have them fish for the starfish. You can have them tell you what animals are in there. You can have them match the two sharks to each other. Things like that. It's a really great naturalistic, fun way to get the kids involved and really have that hands-on learning experience that a lot of kids need. So my online product is a very, very simple PowerPoint presentation. It basically displays a menu of the 6 sea animals we've targeted within this lesson, and then each page after that shows a picture of the animal with a few fun facts that are listed both in a written format and with an audio playback. And there are 2 different ways you can present this to the student based on their needs and their goals. You can present it on the iPad as the PowerPoint presentation and allow the children to use the touchscreen to navigate through it. The touchscreens are really sensitive and they can flip back and forth between what animal interests them. They can go back to the main menu. They can look at the picture of all of the fish on the front cover. Or you can hand them the iPad and you can show them the YouTube video, which goes through the entire presentation in a sequential order. And that way, it's less interaction, but it might be more beneficial for a younger audience who might have a harder time navigating through a PowerPoint presentation. So those 2 products, or 3 products, I suppose, work together in a really, really great way to really keep the lesson topic and the theme of the lesson front and center throughout all of the day's activities. As I mentioned earlier, you'll do a little bit of table time. You'll go through those pictures and that intense training, and then you take a break, and that's when you pull out the box of water and you let them play and splash and learn. And then you go back to the table for more intense teaching, and then maybe go outside and use sidewalk chalk to draw pictures of the animals, and then come back to the table, and it's just a back and forth intense teaching mixed in with some natural environment training. The online product really is great with the iPad. Like I said, our kids love the iPad. And it really kind of keys into their proficiency with technology and allows them to experience it that way in a way that they're already inclined to use. So the individualization of the program, like I said, it's written with the student's specific needs in mind. So some adaptations you can make if a child has a communication difficulty. They can respond, instead of verbally, they can respond with sign language. They can respond with a communication board or an iPad with a voice output. A child with a sensory impairment might skip out on the water box activity and just go straight for the video. And students might even need some hand-over-hand prompting or some physical prompting to participate and scoop fish out of the bucket, and that can be faded out over time so that eventually the child can participate independently on their own. Jumped a little ahead of myself there. I apologize about that. But we are at the end of the presentation. I really appreciate you guys and your willingness to hang in there and be open to a different perspective and something that looks a little different.